Hello and welcome to Choose Your Crown Part 4. Part 4 will be covering the Tripartite Man, and this is a supernatural journey through creation, out of the garden, and into eternity. On the previous videos, we've covered creation days 1 through 5, and now we have reached day 6. And there's a lot to unpack in day 6, and this is only the beginning. Day 6. And Elohim said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. Elohim made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all of the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And Elohim saw that it was Tov. Then Elohim said, "Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So Elohim created mankind in his own image. In the image of Elohim he created them, male and female, he created them. Elohim blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." So here we are at the creation of mankind. And we will mostly be going over the idea of the image. Genesis 2:4 through 9. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for Yahweh Elohim had not yet sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. But a mist came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then Yahweh Elohim formed a man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now Yahweh Elohim had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. Yahweh Elohim made all kinds of trees to grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So in day 6, the creation of land-dwelling animals and humans was contained. And the garden in the Eden that had been planted by Elohim could have been planted on day 3 when the first plants appeared, because it says it had been planted. But no other plants had yet sprung up upon the earth until there was a man to work them. So I had an ebook. Well, I have an ebook, and that is where most of these slides are coming from. I made this ebook in 2021, like early 2021, and of course, when we're all learning about these things, it all takes a lot of time and a lot of studying things out, and sometimes you can learn a lot about something, but then as time goes on, you still realize you've made some mistakes and you have to change them. So when I originally studied this out and wrote the ebook for this whole Choose Your Crown teaching, I placed the creation of Adam on day 3 because I was trying to reconcile the mentioning of no plants springing up yet and the creation of Adam. And I just thought day 6 had to do with the dominion of mankind over the earth. But I have since then decided to remain with day 6 for the creation of mankind and his dominion given, because of just that little small spot where in verse 8 where it says Yahweh Elohim had planted a garden in the east, because it doesn't say when he had planted it, so I'm guessing that was on day 3. Anyway, so if you have read my ebook or have got a hold of it or will get a hold of it now that you've heard me mention it, just realize I placed the creation of Adam on day 3 in my ebook, but I have since then corrected that because of the springing up of the plants. So just a little thing. Some people get caught up on small details like that, and I don't want people to discount me for that if they don't like the idea of him, of me mentioning that he was created on day 3, and I have since then fixed that. Anyways, that was just a small thing I wanted to cover. Day 6 of creation has much to unpack in its literal, allegorical, and prophetic themes. So I'm not going to get too caught up on the day 3 with the plants thing. We are on day 6 now. Adam is being created. Let's jump in. In Hebrew, the word for ground is Adamah, and Adam is made from the dust of the Adamah. Adam has the meanings of mankind, ruddy, red, and red-dyed. So essentially, Adam is a man made of clay from the ground. We somewhat know this to be true because soil, like true dirt soil, is a microenvironment. And it's like the final place of where things return to dust. So we know that Adam is made from the dust of the Adamah, and it's also where dust returns. And it's a microbiome, and the human body is also a microbiome. Yeah, we have flesh and blood and all of that, but also within us are very, well, even on our skin, there's tiny little microbes, and I don't like calling them germs because that just gives them a negative connotation, but we are a microbiome. There are teeny tiny microorganisms living within us that communicate, that can determine whether or not we're healthy or strong or unhealthy. And that's the same for soil. So we can be compared to soil very heavily. And even if our food is not coming from healthy soil, we become unhealthy. So we are very tied into soil. And it is not a mere coincidence that the skin tones of mankind match the colorations of the clay from the earth. So if you compare skin tones of humans to all the different varying colorations of clay from the earth, they match up, as you can see in these pictures. The creation of mankind. So Adamah in Hebrew is ground, and from right to left it is Aleph, strength, Dalet, path, Mem, water or springs, and Hey, behold. So we could come up with the pictographic definition of the strength of the path that water or springs it can behold. And this makes sense because the ground does have the strength to behold the path of waters. And this is most likely the main purpose of land. Like, land could have been created mainly for the purpose of holding waters. And if you watched the previous videos, you know that the very original thing that was here and that the earth was created out of was water. So then land would have to be made secondly to contain and hold the waters underneath of the firmament, so that there's paths for the waters to behold. So that's a really cool definition for the word ground. It also does mean that the ground is strong because it even starts with the Aleph. So, I mean, the ground has to be strong in its making to be able to contain everything that does and hold waters, because waters are strong and they waters can carve paths and stuff, like you've seen with canyons and whatnot. So it's a very cool definition for the word ground. And here we are with Adam, and his name comes from the word ground. And his name alone is from right to left in Hebrew is Aleph, strength, Dalet, path, Mem, waters or springs. So his name is more simply the strength of the path of water. So like how we are vessels of clay and we hold, and we could be said to hold waters or life in us. So the Hebrew word picture for Adam gives the idea that man is a vessel of clay and water, just like a clay pot. So very, very neat. The breath of life. Yahweh breathed the breath of life into Adam's nostrils. And if we also go back to the previous videos where I explained how Elohim works as a plurality of powers, his breath is the Holy Spirit or the Ruach HaKodesh, and he breathes that, and it belongs to him only, to him alone. And when he breathes it, that word is the neshama. So, and neshama means life and spirit. And this is such a beautiful word, and it ties in to all of these teachings. And here is the word neshama broken down into its pictographic form, into its pictographic language. So neshama, meaning spirit or breath, from right to left is seed from the noon, shin is breakdown or teeth, mem is water, and hay is breath. So this is a word that means the seed that needs broken down in water to allow breath. So Yahweh's own breath is a seed that needs broken down. And we're going to get into that. It needs broken down in waters. And Adam is a vessel of waters. And the seed needs broken down in it. So here's a picture of these words. So we have the seed. It needs broken down or consumed, like how soil can break down materials, like I just mentioned. And then we need water too. And then when the seed gets broken down in waters, there is a beholdence or a breath that takes place. Breath as a spirit is being compared to a seed that needs to be allowed to grow. Life is che in Hebrew, which means living. So, in other words, Yahweh breathed the spirit of living. Yahweh breathed the spirit of living into Adam to animate Adam into a living soul or a living being, and wants the seed of his spirit to grow in Adam, because the neshama works within Adam. And the Hebrew word for being or soul is nephesh. So nephesh is living soul or being, and nephesh is from right to left, noon, which is seed, pe, which is word or speak, and shin, which is breakdown or consumed. So the living soul or a living being, its definition is the seed of the word, or to speak, broken down. Do you see how these work together? So here we have Yahweh's breath of life, or Yahweh's neshama, is the seed that needs to be broken down in waters, and a living soul, which is the vessel of waters where the seed of the word is broken down. So Yahuwah has his neshama, and that's the seed that needs broken down. And then the living soul of a human is the place where the seed gets broken down so that it can speak its word. And that word behaves as a seed containing instructions. This once again directs our attention back to the significance of the womb model that I've mentioned in previous videos, how Yahuwah always likes to work as an instruction giver, and he fertilizes and he gives instruction, he gives his perfect Torah, and we are a vessel for that, and the earth is a vessel for that, and the waters act as a womb for it. But when we don't work as a womb and when we don't receive his word, that is when destruction and chaos and curse comes. So now we have the garden enclosure. Yahweh had planted the Garden of Eden for Adam, and Eden in Hebrew is Aden. And Aden, from right to left in Hebrew, is Ayin, which is eyes or experience, Dalet, path, and Nun is life or seed. So we could say the Garden of Eden was the experience leading to the path of life. So something needed to be experienced there, as we could all know. And that would lead to the path of life. The Garden of Eden can be said to have been the experience to the path of life, and Adam is to work in the garden and keep it. In the midst of the garden was the tree of life, as well as the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Here, we again come across something being placed in the midst. So, previously in my other video, the firmament was something that was placed in the midst. It was said to have been placed in the midst. And now we have the two trees being placed in the midst. So here we read Genesis 2:15. Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. So the Hebrew word for took used in verse 15 is lakach, and it means to take in marriage. Also in verse 15, the word for placed is nuach, which means to rest, lay down, and settle. Another way to put it is that Yahweh made a place to be in covenant with Adam and have Adam rest. And we know Yahweh is an Elohim of covenant, a marriage covenant, and that he really emphasizes giving his people rest in covenant. And that is something he's doing with Adam here in the Garden of Eden. And now recall how Adam was made of clay. So how does a potter make a clay pot? A potter must use clay and water, right? So in order to make a clay pot, you have to have water and you have to have clay. And then you have to allow the clay pot to rest in a cool air to set properly. So cool air is mentioned in the Garden of Eden, and it's mentioned that that Adam is taken in marriage, or has a word that means to be taken in marriage mentioned for him, and he's there to rest. So we have a just created clay pot that needs to set properly. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, when we revisit Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, and rephrase it, it can go like this. Then Yahweh Elohim formed Adam from the dry ground and blew into his face his name, his character, and his living waters, and Adam became a living soul. So that's just adding definitions into Genesis 2:7. So when Adam, as a living soul, was placed in the garden here is the Hebrew word gan, which means an enclosure. So here we once again are getting that dome or enclosure idea, like the firmament. And Adam was to cultivate it and keep it, or to serve and protect it. Keep this in mind. If a place as perfect as Eden had to be enclosed, served, and protected, what was outside of it, or even what was in it? What needed to be enclosed, served, and protected and worked? What was so special? Okay, so here's some pictures of how you make a clay pot and the breathing of the breath of life, and here's soil and here's water and how the two have to go together to make clay. And then here's like an image I found of like a type of firmament with a type of a tree of life. This isn't exactly how I would picture it, but it's a pretty neat fantasy-like picture of how it could be depicted. The Garden of Eden, there's rivers, there's greenery, there's the tree of life in the middle, something else is winding around it, and what needs protected in there, you know? It's a very special place. All right, made in Elohim's image. So, in Genesis 2:21 through 25, it says, "So Yahweh Elohim caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he slept, he took one of the man's ribs and closed up the area with flesh. And from the rib that Yahweh Elohim had taken from the man, he made a woman and brought her to him. And the man said, 'This at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed.'" So, in order to fully understand the creation of woman from man, one must first track back to Genesis 1:26. And in Genesis 1:26, it says, "Then Elohim said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, to rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock and over the earth itself, and every creature that crawls upon it.'" So to be made in Elohim's image, the first thing to know is that Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image." And remember from our previous video of this teaching series, Yahweh or Elohim is a title. The name is Yahweh. He has a breath, that is his Holy Spirit, and his right arm and chest cross section, or what could be called his breast, is the sun. And they are a plurality of powers, not a plurality of persons. It's one person, but it can still speak as a plurality of powers to say, "Let us make man in our image." So our is signifying the plurality of powers held in Elohim, being the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Father is Yahweh, spelled out Yod He Wah, which can either mean hand behold, nail behold. So the Father, his own name already points to the Son, and hand behold, nail behold. Or his name can also have the pictographic definition of work, breath, secure breath. And depending how you read out the pictographs, it can be found that both word stories are true of him. So his name is true any way that you read those pictographs of Yod He Wah. He beheld nails in his hands as the Son, and he works and secures our breathing as the Father. And here's even a picture at the bottom of the Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh and pictographic images, and it really does look like a hand reaching out, and the Yod is kind of like if you flip our lungs upside down, it makes that like Y shape, and then the two people on the sides are breathing or lungs. So his name really does mean he is securing breath with his hand, or taking his hand to our lungs. And if you think about it, it's kind of true, because if you think about how lungs work, they have to press in and press out, and it's even kind of a mystery of the phenomena of how the human heart beats, because it's a muscle that never tires, and you wonder what apparatus is functioning behind that. And I do like to think that it really is Yahweh's breath within us securing all of this to work, because his name means work, breath, secure breath. So he's working our breaths and he's securing our breaths. So our Heavenly Father is powerful, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and his name even says that. Anyways, the second power is the Son, and that is Yahusha, who does the work and will of the Father to bring about salvation. So the Son is the salvational part of Yahweh. And it's always his right arm that extends out for salvation. Even in the Old Testament, that was the part of him that worked out salvation. And the third power is the Holy Spirit, or the Ruach HaKodesh. And Ruach means spirit, and Kodesh means set apart, so the set apart spirit. And the Ruach HaKodesh is the comforter and nurturer that teaches and brings people closer to the Son and the Father. So, if mankind was made in Elohim's image, then we too are a triune being, one whole person of 3 layer levels. So Yahweh Elohim is one whole personage, but has 3 layers of power that work together as the one person. And we're made in his image, so we too are like that. We are each one person, but we have 3 layer levels of power. I don't know what other word I can use other than power. We'll go to the next slide. The 3 layer levels of the triune nature, natures, powers, or natures, 3 layer levels of natures of power of mankind, and those are body, soul, and spirit. Okay, I know a lot of us have heard of this. You can even look up holistic health or anything like that, or type in body, mind, and spirit, and you're gonna see them all in a circle, or all intertwined, or you're gonna see yoga poses and stuff for that. That is a lot different from what I'm trying to explain. I'm sure a lot of people have had a New Age or Gnostic understanding of body, soul, and spirit, or just a holistic understanding of it, but I'm here to give you the biblical understanding of it. Biblical Melchizedek covenant understanding of body, mind, and spirit, or body, soul, and spirit. So, one does not need to be a Gnostic or a New Ager, or even understand Gnosticism or New Age beliefs to understand this. And later I will be covering the Gnostic New Age counterfeit of this, because that is the counterfeit. So just be careful when you're on Google and you're typing in body, soul, and spirit, because you're probably going to get a lot of New Age or Gnostic definitions for these. Anyways, so the body is our flesh, bone, and organ systems, and the soul part of ourselves is our will, our knowledge, our emotions, imaginations, memories, and affections. And for there to be a living soul, because remember the soul is the nephesh, there must be a body. Remember, the soul was created when there was a vessel, a water vessel, and Yahweh's breath came to it, and then the soul was created. So that's 1, 2, 3 parts right there. So for there to be a living soul, or nephesh, there must be a body to breathe the breath of life, which is the spirit. So our spirit, which is actually Yahweh's breath, we're given his breath to breathe as our spirit. It's given to us by Yahweh's breath of life. Okay? And thus, mankind was made in the same triune nature as Elohim, to be made in the same image. So, we have those 3 parts within us. However, that does not mean that every single one of us walks in covenant with Yahweh or even knows who he is. So there are people who, when they know him and they are in covenant with him and they are under his salvation, his saving right arm, his son, they will serve as Yahweh's temple in their body, and they will be guided properly by the Ruach HaKodesh, and they serve as Yahweh's living temple and as who they are. However, there's also the unsanctified person who does not know Yahweh, who does not walk in covenant with him, who does not seek him out in their life, and so they alternatively they defile their body temple, and they might even go after other paths where they think they're not defiling their body temple, like New Age or so on, and take on that idea of body, mind, and spirit. So, we're going to break this down, each part. So, the spirit part of mankind to be made in his image, it is the part of us that holds the neshama. It's the part of us that holds Yahweh's very breath within us. And this is given to all of his creation. All of his creation is given his breath, but mankind is a little bit more special because we can tap into it to a higher extreme. So it is also the inner part of ourself, our inner man or our inner woman, and it is our consciousness, and it is our awareness. Without Yahweh's breath or spirit, you can have something like a robot, and it could be considered to be alive or thinking, but it's not the same at all as Yahweh's consciousness. It's not something that can be 100% beautifully replicated. Or you can't even replicate it ever in a set apart, loving way. Like, you could have an AI built system robot and it could have consciousness, it could reach a point of consciousness, but it's never going to have true love and inside of it. It's never going to have true attributes of Yahweh inside of it. Okay, so we'll get into that later. That's that's for later in the video series, but this is something to understand before we get there. How these things can come to be. So, anyways, the spirit level of a person, it holds the neshama, holds Yahweh's very breath, holds his very spirit that he breathed into Adam, and we all have it in us, whether or not we know it's from him. And when we serve as Yahweh's temple, that part of us is stripped of sin and stripped of carnal nature. We're only tapping into his set apart spirit, and we allow his set apart spirit to dwell freely within us, and we partner with his instructions, and we easily hear and see things from him because we're tapping in. We understand his breath, and we understand who he is, and we know how to discern good and evil, and we have faith in him. And this is the part of within us that prays and worships and needs that deep relational connection to him. Okay? And then the human who does not know Yahweh and does not seek Yahweh and does not have a desire to know him, they still have his breath in them and they still have consciousness. However, it's joined to sin, so it's kind of like you're just blocking it out, and they have the desires of the flesh, so they're just kind of, it's there, but they block it out. It's like they're not tapping into knowing him. So even though the breath is there, the consciousness is there, there's a part of them, and it is the veil that they remains. It is the hardened heart, and they do not allow the Ruach to dwell there, so the Ruach HaKodesh cannot freely dwell in them. They reject his instructions. They're always seeking knowledge, but they never have the eyes to see or ears to hear his voice. They do not know how to discern good from evil well. Some people can have a bit of moral compass, and they can understand plain and obvious goods and plain and obvious evils, but once things start getting intricate, they do not know how to discern it well. And they can rely on the world or other spirits. They don't have faith in Yahweh alone, so they can be tossed to and fro to any kind of practice or spirituality or non-spirituality, but they don't even know that even that is commanded by spirits. And they do not seek to praise Yahweh. They don't worship him. They might worship others. They might not worship anything at all. Okay? So now we're moving on to the part of the human. So when you have a body or a clay vessel and Yahweh's breath is placed into it, you then have the part in between, which is the soul. And we'll also get into how the soul is also in the blood. So where there is blood, that is where the soul is too. So we'll get there. Okay, our will. So the soul is the mind, will, knowledge, emotions. It's like kind of what makes us individuals. And as an individual who is in line with Yahweh, so the spirit's there, like on the previous slide, then the rest is going to come in suit. So our will is in line with Yahweh's will. We seek wisdom beyond our own understanding. We clear out, confess, and heal negative emotions and experiences. We move past them. We keep our affections, actions, and emotions in a set apart manner, which is so important for those who believe in Yahweh and and walk in covenant with Him. We need to keep our affections, actions, and emotions set apart and kosher. Sin makes us feel yucky, and we are always careful about everything we watch, see, do, and advocate for. So, when the human soul is in line with Yahuwah's spirit, there's just going to be certain things within our knowledge, our will, and our emotions that line up with Him entirely. But for a person who does not have His spirit, they don't have good discernment, they are without seeking Yahuwah, they're going to choose their own will. They're going to lean on their own understanding and knowledge. They're going to have a hard time overcoming and healing from negative emotions and experiences, or they'll seek other ways of doing so. They're not going to confess or accept that there is sin. Their desires, actions, and emotions will go as far as their imaginations allow. They're not going to have set apart manner of living out their desires and actions and emotions. They might have their own moral understanding to where they can cap them at a certain point, but it depends on the individual as far as their imagination goes, or as far as their own moral compass will let them go. They will live out their own will and actions. Sin will gratify their flesh. They won't feel yucky from certain sins. Some things will gratify them. Once again, it depends on the individual who doesn't know Yahuwah. Some people, certain sins do gross them out, but they'll do others that still gratify them. But someone who is in line with Yahuwah, all sin will make them feel yucky. Okay, and then they do not always mind what they watch, see, do, and advocate for. They just might not have as much of a care about what they are watching or what they're seeing or what they do or what they are in line with. Okay? And this takes us to the next part, the body, the clay vessel, our flesh, our body systems. Okay? So this is the part of us that the breath of life was breathed into for us to even have a soul. And when we're in line with Yahuwah, there's certain things that we do and do not do with our body. We take care of our bodies as the living temple of Yahuwah. We eat clean, biblically clean. We do not defile our temple. We do not take in anything unclean that can corrupt or alter the natural human body. We rely on mostly natural healing as well as the reliance on Yahuwah to meet the body's needs. We accept that the natural body is temporary and dies, and we're okay with that. And we understand that pain and sickness happen, but that they are not eternal. And also, if we're living in covenant anyways, we're not going to be worried about taking part in the world's plagues, because the world's plagues don't even touch Yahuwah's people. So we might have like regular sicknesses or regular bouts of just pain just from living in this world, but we can also be assured that the plagues alone that are meant for this world will not come to us. That's a whole topic on its own, the whole body thing, and but it is important for Yahweh's people to do certain things and not do certain things, and eat certain things and not eat certain things, because health is a real paradigm in the natural world, and we still have to take care of our natural bodies. Okay, and and on the other side of this is somebody who is not in line with Yahweh at all, or doesn't know Him, or doesn't seek Him well. They might take care of their body as they personally desire. So they might eat clean, live clean. We don't know. It's how they personally desire. It might not be motivated by Yahweh. It's just completely motivated by them how they eat. They eat as they choose. They may eat as clean as possible. They may not at all. We do not know. It's how they choose. They may or may not mind if their body takes in unclean or unhealthy products, or they might be obsessive with the idea of doing so. They may or may not mind if anything enters the body that can alter its natural functions and expressions as a human. They might allow any form of healing and meeting their needs. Like, we don't know what forms of healing they are okay with and what they're not okay with. They are most normal people who do not know Yahweh are naturally afraid to accept death, and they want to prolong the body by any means. Now, that's not true for everyone who doesn't know Yahweh. Some people seek death because they're so unsatisfied with this life, and that's sad. But I'm talking about most people who do not know Yahweh. The pride of life makes them not want to accept death, and they'll do anything to prolong their life here, even if that means unnatural or unsanctified means of prolonging their body. All right, pain and sickness happen, and remedies are always sought but never truly found. So they can't just accept that pain and sickness happen. They'll always be looking for remedies, looking for a cure, looking for something, but they're never going to truly find it because there is only one true remedy, and that is Yahusha the Messiah. And if they don't have him, they're going to never stop seeking remedy for this life. Okay, so that's my spiel on the tripartite man, on those sections. But we have to understand these because a lot of biblical concepts build up on these ideas. All right, here we go further into made in Elohim's image. So, image in Hebrew is Selim, and it is Sod, desire, Lamed, control, or staff, and Mem is water. So, image, and this is important to know later too because there is an image of the beast as well. There's an image of Elohim and there's an image of the beast. And an image is the desire to control the waters. Because remember, if we are a clay pot that holds waters, something's going to want to have the desire to control those waters. Okay, so this brings us right back to Genesis 1:2, where Yahweh uses his breath to control the waters. Oh yeah, like in the very second verse of Genesis 1, Yahweh had his Holy Spirit over the waters to control them. Okay? And Yahweh wants his image to be filled with his breath. Okay? And furthermore, it says, according to our likeness. So he wants everything to be according to his likeness, and likeness is demuth. So demuth is dalet, which is path, mem, water, and wa, which can mean connected, and tav, which is mark or covenant. Okay, so his likeness and his character means the path of the waters connected to a mark or covenant. Okay, so whenever the word demuth occurs in the Bible, almost all of them have to do with a pattern Yahweh has given. And to be made in the image and likeness and character of Elohim is to be filled with the breath of life and to be directed in Yahweh's covenant path. Okay? if you remove the path or the dalet from the word demuth, which is his likeness and character, so if you remove his path from the demuth, then you get the word just muth, which happens to be the Hebrew word for death. So right away, if you remove the path, the dalet there, then you get brought to death, which is just muth, okay? Demuth is his likeness and character with the dalet, which is path, and then muth is death, okay? So it's really crazy how that works. So if you remove that path, then you automatically make a covenant with death. So you either have a covenant in his character and in his likeness, or you have a covenant with death. Okay? Adam and the woman. Here we go. This is what we've all been waiting for. Adam's rib was taken out to create the woman. Part of Adam's response was, "She shall be called Isha because she was taken out of Ish." This is the first time Adam refers to himself as anything, and he called himself the Hebrew word Ish. And Ish is actually the word for man and the word for fire, in case anyone didn't know that. And Ish in Hebrew is Aleph, which is strength, and Shin, which is consume. And so man and fire both mean the strength to consume. And this is an essence of the same word for fire. So like I just said, being Esh, which is also Aleph Shin. And Adam calls himself a fire or a man when he sees the woman and calls her Isha. And Isha is woman, and that is Aleph, strength, Shin, consume, and Hey, reveal. So the woman, the word for woman here, means the strength to consume revealed. So what Adam was saying was that since she was taken out of him, she reveals him to himself. So before Adam knew the woman, he had no reason to be self-aware. He only had to know Yahweh along with the other plants and animals. He didn't need to be self-aware or aware of his actions. The woman made him become aware of who he was. She was designed to be Adam's perfect helpmeet straight from his own side. The man and woman were both naked and not ashamed. Naked in Hebrew is aram. Okay? So aram is naked, and it means ayin, experience, resh, person, wa, joint, and mem can mean water or might, and it means to see a person joined to their might or waters. Right? So they are clay vessels of waters, and they were naked and not ashamed, and this is because their might and waters as clay vessels were directly from Yahweh. So they had no reason to be ashamed when they saw each other joined to their might, because they were both directly from Yahweh. Nothing has changed yet, so there's no reason to be ashamed. And here we have the word ashamed, which is bosh. So we have bet, within, wa, joined, and shin, destruction. So ashamed means to within yourself, or within being joined to destruction. So, Adam and the woman were able to see one another being naked without who they were within becoming attached to destruction. And I mean, think about it. Because something has changed in this life, if we see another person naked, it's not something that we should just be used to. Like, it does make us feel a certain way within ourselves. Whether we're uninterested in seeing them naked or whether we are highly interested in seeing them naked, there is something not right about the way we react within ourselves. Which is why it is important to cover our naked bodies, because there is something about that within ourselves being joined to destruction when we now see someone naked. Unless we are in a covenant marriage together and things are consensual and healthy, then that is a marriage and a means of seeing someone naked that Yahweh has ordained. But other than that, like, well, I don't, we'll continue on, but yes, the word ashamed does mean to be joined to destruction within. So there is something to that. And there is a reason why it said they saw each other naked and were not ashamed. And I think this is because their nakedness at first was directly connected to the covenantal path of Yahweh's likeness, the demuth, his likeness. They were on his path, they were in covenant. There was no reason for there to be shame in this place. So Adam and the woman were unashamedly naked as flesh and bone living souls filled with Yahweh's breath. That is how it was meant to be. And I've seen, if you do start to dig into Gnosticism and to understand how they view the story of Adam and Eve, it's actually really messed up because I will get into this later, but they make it out to be like Adam and Eve were thoughtless animals that Yahweh made, and that was why they were unashamed. And then when they were enlightened by the serpent, that's when they were able to think for themselves. And that's just not true. I mean, Adam and Eve were able to think for themselves in the Garden of Eden. They were already separate from animals. They were not made like the animals at all. They were made into like higher already. So that Gnostic view is already wrong in its understanding, especially because they don't look into the Hebrew to understand things deeper. But no, they already could reason, and they already had will, knowledge, and emotions, and they were in covenant relationship with Yahweh. So it's not that they were unreasoning animals, and that's why they were unashamed. No, they had action and thoughts, and it was to a higher level than we can understand now already. The enlightenment that came from the serpent was actually what did the opposite. So we'll get there, but Gnosticism flips everything upside down and makes it confusing, but we'll get into that later. But no, they were in covenant path with Yahweh in his likeness. They were unashamed and naked together, and it was beautiful. There was nothing wrong with it at this point. And at first glance, it is easy to think that Adam and the woman have flesh, the same flesh as in our current world. But what if it was much more special than that? Adam was directly made in Yahweh's image and likeness from the dust of the earth, and the woman came from Adam's own side, okay? And this is when we get into why I titled this part Garments of Light. In Psalm 104, verses 1 through 2, it says, Bless Yahweh, O my soul. O Yahweh, my Elohim, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. Okay, so we see here from Psalm 104 that Yahweh is a being whose garment is light. And therefore, before Adam and the woman were given flesh garments of dust as actual skin, their flesh garments, this is a little bit confusing with my wording. Okay, so therefore, before Adam and the woman were given flesh garments of dust as actual skin, so skin as we understand it now, their flesh garments in the Garden of Eden were dust composed of light. So what if the clay, the dust in Eden was composed of light? Like how Yahweh covers himself with light as with a garment. And they walked with him. And because it says they walked with him in the garden, and if he covered himself as with a garment of light, and the dust there, how do we know if it did or did not glow? And so perhaps Adam was really saying that the woman made him realize he was a kind of fire. Because remember, Ish, the word for man, and the word for fire are the same. And what if he was saying, wow, like, you're really making me realize, like, I am this that Yahweh created. And so what if, like, yeah, it is a clay vessel of, like, it is a clay pot that's made of dust and water to make it. But what if it's more like a terracotta, like fire pit, like kind of thing made out of clay? Like, what if there was like a aspect about it that made it like light? Like, if you could imagine a glowing terracotta vessel pot. I don't know. I mean, how can we imagine some of these things? I mean, he said he was like a fire, and he's made in Yahweh's image, and Yahweh covers himself with a garment with light. And we know that there was a fall afterwards, so things could have been so much different than our current understanding in the Garden of Eden. That's just my speculation, though. Here's some pictures. I have like a fire pit, like a terracotta fire pit, some glowing dust, like embers. And that is kind of like what fire is. You can't get a fire without something igniting dust into the air. And then here's like a man made out of flame. So here we move on with this garments of light idea. While their flesh may have been like embers or light, they still had bones. So we know that they had bones because the woman was taken from the man. And having bones also means that there were organs to be protected by the bone structure. Because bones, the purpose for bones is to protect our organs. Like our skull protects our brain, and our rib cage protects our lungs. And remember, even Yahweh was able to breathe into Adam at this early point in time. So that we're assuming Adam had lungs and he had bones. because how else would he be breathing then? And this garment of light is mimicked in Yahuwah's instructions for the garments of the Levitical priesthood, because they were to be covered from head to toe in white linen, or in a full spectrum of color, like the high priest had a full color spectrum. And I spoke about the high priest's garment in my previous videos too, if you want to learn more about that and its higher meanings. And the high, so we have like a full color spectrum here, because white is already a combination of the full color spectrum. And then we also have like mosaic, woven colorings. So what if Adam and Eve really did glow in a full light spectrum, but they still had organs and they still had bones? And let's jump to the next slide to explain this more. Garments of light. Once again, other places in the Bible where people glow like lights are when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai. So when Moshe got, I don't want to say the wrong instance of him coming down from Mount Sinai, because there's a lot of points in time where he comes down from Mount Sinai, but in one of them, his face was glowing from the glory of Yahuwah. And it's even mentioned in the New Testament. There's a point where that is mentioned. And when Yahusha was transfigured on a mountain with Moshe and Elijah. So Yahusha was transfigured, and this is like a big thing in the New Testament where he's transfigured into light. And this is in Matthew 17, 1-2. After 6 days, Yahusha took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And there he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as the light. So, Yahusha transfigured, and I still believe he had his organs and bones, but his face and his skin and his clothes shone. And I'm sure Moshe was no different. I'm sure Elijah was no different in that instance. And this is apocryphal, but in the book of Yasher, I'm trying to think of which baby it was. I'm pretty sure it was Noah as a baby in the book of Yasher. When he was a baby, his skin shone like light. And it was a big deal. And I think he was even given, Noah was given the garments of skin, of regular skin that Yahuwah made for Adam and Eve. I think it was to cover his body of light. I don't know, something weird like that was going on. So, there is something more to this that we have not yet even broke the surface of. Okay, so garments of light even more. Let's look a little bit more into this. We're nearing the end of this video too. There's 12 more slides left, but we are still nearing the end. So, garments of light. If Adam and the woman used to be covered in garments of light in some indescribable fashion, incorporating waters, clay, flesh, bones, and the breath of life, because those are all parts of it. So, we definitely have waters, clay, flesh, bones, and the breath of life all being put together into some kind of human. Then what happened to remove us from that former glory? Okay, because remember, the Garden of Eden had to be worked and protected by Adam. Okay, and there's one tree in the garden In particular, that gives us an answer to this riddle, but we're not there yet. And ultimately, those who persevere and are granted to take from the other tree, the tree of life, they'll be transfigured into new body vessels of more glorious light and splendor. And I use this verse a lot, but 1 Corinthians 15:35-49. Here we go. But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? You fool! What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And what you sow is not the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else. But Elohim gives it a body as he has designed, and to each kind of seed he gives its own body. Not all flesh is the same. Men have one kind of flesh, animals have another, birds have another, and fish another. There are also heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the splendor of the heavenly bodies is of one degree, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is of another. The sun has one degree of splendor, the moon another, and the stars another, and stars differ from star in splendor. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first Adam became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual, however, was not first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man from heaven. As was the earthly man, so also are those who are of the earth, and as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of the heaven. And just as we have borne the likeness of the earthly man, so also shall we bear the likeness of the heavenly man. Okay, so let's kind of break that down a teeny bit. There's a lot going on there, but here's kind of where my thinking is. Adam was the living soul, or nephesh, right? That word, where the seed had to be broken down in water. And Messiah Yahusha is the second Adam that was the seed that broke down to be sown imperishable as a life-giving ruach. Remember, like, the whole point of a human soul was for a seed to be broken down in the waters. And Yahusha is that seed that was broken down to be sown imperishable as a life-giving spirit. And remember, the neshama had to be broken down in the nefesh. Yahusha was the fulfillment of that. So when you put those two words together, Yahusha became the fulfillment of it. And although the first Adam may have had flesh of light, it was still of the splendor of the dust of the earth, okay? It was still from the earth itself. Whereas Messiah Yahusha's flesh of light is as of the splendor of heaven. So Yahusha is heavenly flesh and bone as well as life-giving ruach. And Adam was just natural flesh and bone. Even in the Garden of Eden, it was still a natural dust, a natural flesh and bone. But Yahusha was the one that was broken down for it to be of a higher splendor for when we are raised from the curse of sin and death forever. Okay? And I'm sure I could have explained that better. I'm sure I could explain that deeper. I'm sure we could even get into hours of explaining this. But that's where my thoughts are right now on it. And we know if we keep reading in our Bibles, it is the spirit of the anti-Messiah the Antichrist, to say that Yahusha is not flesh, or that he is returning in the flesh. So to say he's not returning in the flesh, or to say that he was not flesh at all, or to say he's never been flesh, never will be flesh, that is Antichrist. Okay? Because even Adam had bone, organs, some kind of dust composure, some kind of breath in him. And he was made in the likeness of Yahweh, which is also Yahusha. And Yahusha was born in the flesh here, and then raised and to a higher splendor of flesh, heavenly flesh. So for many in 2 John 1, 7 through 11 it says, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, refusing to confess the coming of Yahusha Messiah in the flesh. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you do not lose what we have worked for, but that you may be fully rewarded. Anyone who runs ahead without remaining in the teaching of Messiah does not have Elohim. Whoever remains in his teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you but does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your home or even greet him. Whoever greets such a person shares in his evil deeds." This is heavy. 2 John 1 verses 7 through 11 are so heavy because, first of all, we're getting what an Antichrist is, and a deceiver. That has to do with saying the Messiah is not in the flesh. That we have to remain in the teaching of Messiah in the flesh to be of Elohim, and to even have both the Son and the Father. Because remember, if you don't have the Son, the salvation part of him, you don't even have the Father. Because remember, he is one person of three powers, and the salvific part takes you to the rest of it. You don't even get the Ruach without him, and you don't even get the Father ultimately. And you're not even to greet or let this person into your home if they say Yahusha is not of the flesh. He's not returning in flesh. Because we'll become like that person and share in their evil ways if we even greet them or let them in our home. That's dangerous. That's crazy. And I think it really is because, and I will be getting into it, these teachings where it's Gnostic and they teach that flesh at all, period, is bad. Because they'll say that Yahweh is like a demiurge or whatever, and that any flesh he created is bad, period, all of it, and that only a spiritual consciousness is good. And that is a wicked teaching that is not true, but it's a counterfeit because, yes, there is a spiritual man, but the spiritual man still has a body. And there is the natural man, and the natural man still has a body. But they'll teach you that any type of body or any type of flesh is evil. And you don't want to invite them into your home at all if they say that. So, that's just one thing to be aware of, because that stuff is going to start happening. Okay? The Tripartite Man, Genesis 2:15 through 17. Then Yahweh took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. And Yahweh Elohim commanded him, You may eat freely from every tree of the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die." So Adam is given life and breath by Yahweh, and closely following, there is a tree that is able to take that away if Adam were to eat from it. At the end of verse 16, it says, "surely die." But in the original text, it says, "die, die," or "muth, muth." There is a huge reason for the text to have the word die or muth twice. The reason has to do with our triune nature. Two parts of the nature of man can die when removed from the covenantal path of Yahweh's likeness. Remember, demuth, which is his likeness, and if you subtract dalet, you just get muth, which is death. So don't want to remove that path. The two parts that can die in permanence are the body and the soul. The body dies in physicality, and the soul dies when it is no longer attached to Yahweh's breath. Okay? Remember, a living soul, a nefesh, comes into animation by Yahweh's breath, the neshama. And the neshama always returns back to Yahweh. But the other two can be gone forever. This concept of two deaths might seem strange, but it is all throughout the Bible. Okay? Here are some verses about this tripartite idea of mankind. Ecclesiastes 12:6-7. "Remember him before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to Elohim who gave it." Okay? Mark 8, verses 36-37. "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" Matthew 10:28. "And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell," or Gehenna. James 2:26. "For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also." Okay, so Ecclesiastes, the first scripture I read there, makes such a great picture for how the relationship between body, soul, spirit, and Yahweh work. The silver cord is Yahweh's breath, or his spirit in all of us. The golden bowl is the soul. The pitcher is our body, and the wheel, or the inward parts of man that house the spirit. And the well is the waters of life, or Yahweh himself. So there's a picture here to try and kind of explain it. So pretend you're at a well and you have the well, like the waters, the fountain, like the bottom part, and that is Yahweh himself. He is the living waters, the fountain. But to even get that water, to get into your pitcher, you have to turn the crank. So that's the word, or Yahusha. Now you're turning it, and the stick, the other part of the stick that turns, is your inward man, or your spirit, and then that houses the spirit. So the ruach would be the string that turns inside the inward man and moves it, and it's attached to the soul, which is the bucket. Now you're spinning it, and the string is going down to pull up your soul. Now you've gotten water from the fountains of living water, and you can now fill your pitcher, which is your body. You might have to replay that a few times in your mind. Use that picture that I have placed there and try to think of all how those things interweave together, and how if you turn the crank for the well with the word, and then you the spirit is turning and it's moving the soul to get the water to bring it up because we want to ascend, and then we pour that living waters into our pitcher, which is our body. But if any part of that is broken, it's not going to work right. So in the well model, the body and the soul can both be empty vessels, right? Because it's the bucket and the pitcher, and they both can be empty and they can still exist as being empty. But the idea is to have them become filled with the fountains of living water. So you can just have an empty pitcher and an empty bucket. You don't have to make them move at all to get water from the well. You can just have an empty pitcher and an empty bucket. But in order to have the soul become filled with the living waters, it must become relationally attached to the operations of the Spirit of Elohim that already gives us breath. So we can have the string there, we can have the pitcher, we can have the bucket, but they're not moving, they're not becoming filled, they're just there. Or we can decide to move them and to operate in them. So to operate in them, we're going to need the word of Elohim, and that is Yahusha, to wind it up, to operate, to actually be wound. And once the soul is filled with the living waters, it can then pour them continuously into the body. He is the part that we need to even start winding it, or it's all going to be still. It's not going to do anything. And this is how to make every part of our natures work in true harmony. So this is how we get our body, soul, and spirit to work in harmony, is when we use Yahusha to crank it all. So Thessalonians 5:23, may Elohim himself, the Elohim of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Master Yahusha HaMashiach. Okay, so the body in true harmony has the soul in subjection to the operations of the spirit in the inward self that is wound up by the word of Elohim. And the body is in subjection to the soul, and the soul is in subjection to the inward self that is in subjection to the word. So everything has like a hierarchy here. Everything's in subjection to the next thing. And this order of subjection is important when it comes to sanctification. Yet, people have free will to have the natures of their body operate how they choose. So, you can have it work in perfect harmony and use Yahusha to crank it, and everything's working in subjection in a perfect order. Or you have complete free will because Yahweh loves us so much that he even gives us free will to make our own choices, to make our own decisions, to operate how we choose. Because he wants us to truly choose to love him and to follow him. He wants us to choose by our own will to follow him and love him, because he will not force us to do it. And he has given people free will to the point where they can choose to reject him if they want. So, he is not some dictator. He won't. If you want to reject him, you're allowed to. It's your choice. Jeremiah 2:13. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and they have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. Okay, so It's sad, but people can choose. The rib of Adam. Now, with the understanding of our triune nature, let's take another look at the creation of woman. So, now that we got that all out of the way, we can look at Isha a little bit more. Genesis 2:21 through 22. One moment, I need a sip of water. So Yahweh Elohim caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he slept, he took one of the man's ribs and closed up the area with flesh. And from that rib that Yahweh Elohim had taken from the man, he made a woman and brought her to him. So Yahweh caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep in order to extract one of Adam's ribs. The word fall in Hebrew is nafal, and it means to be brought down. And this is also something to keep in mind for later because this is a root word for the Nephilim, which are the fallen ones, and they were a big part of why there needed to be a whole earth flood. Okay? Nephal, which just means fall, but it also has a little bit more of a pictographic meaning. And from right to left, it is noon, which is life or seed, peh, open, and lamed, guide. So it can mean a life opened up by guidance, which is kind of a really deep definition for that, or to just be led or brought down. So something being led or opened up or even being led to be brought down. This word is such a strange word because when you look it up on Bible Hub and you look at all the different definitions, it can mean fall, it can mean to be brought down, it can mean to kill, it can mean to give birth. It has a lot of different meanings, but I do think there's something about the peh being in it for being opened up because it can't even mean to like give birth. So this is a very strange word. We might do another teaching on it later, but right now I'm just going to try to keep it simple. Okay? Deep sleep in verse 21 is Tardame, and it is a supernatural trance. So Tardame is a trance, all right? And it is Tav, which is marker covenant, Resh, head, Dalet, path, Mem, waters, and Hay, behold. So it can mean to give a covenant in the head, path of the waters, behold. Okay, so it's about giving a covenant in the head, which for the path of the waters to behold. A regular deep sleep from exhaustion without supernatural intervention would just be Radam, which is Resh Dalet Mem, which is the middle part of Tardame. So the difference is that the supernatural one has the Tav and Hay for the purpose of beholding something pertaining to covenant. Whereas the regular sleep, a deep sleep, does not have the Tav or the Hay to behold a covenant. You're just sleeping. Okay, and this is the same type of deep trance that Abram went into to receive the proof of his covenant in Genesis 15. So remember, Abram also went into a deep sleep or a trance to behold a covenant. So this is a pretty cool word. Okay, so what is being conveyed here is that Adam's consciousness or his spirit was brought down because of the word nafal, so something was being brought down or brought open so that he could enter a supernatural sleep state. This is Yahweh's version of anesthesia. At least this is how I imagine it. Anesthesia is a state of controlled temporary loss of sensation or awareness that is induced for medical purposes. It may include some or all of, I might pronounce this wrong, analgesia, relief from or prevention of pain, paralysis, muscle relaxation, amnesia, loss of memory, and unconsciousness. So it may include some or all of that. 1 second. Can you get... A patient under the effects of anesthetic drugs is referred to as being anesthetized. Anesthesia enables the painless performance of medical procedures that would otherwise cause severe or intolerable pain to an anesthetized patient, or would otherwise be technically unfeasible. The Hebrew word for rib in these verses is sele, which can mean rib, but more importantly here, can also mean side chamber, or wall. So all I'm saying there is Yahweh brought down Adam's consciousness, or somehow put him under a supernatural sleep state or trance of anesthesia, so that Adam wouldn't have to go through the pain that would otherwise be unfeasible for that. That's all I'm saying. But it's also to create a covenant too, because he's making him a wife, so it's pretty cool. The Hebrew word for rib in these verses is selah, which can mean rib. Oh yeah, so the whole side chamber, or a side. So rib is selah, and that is sad, which is side or desire, lamed, toward, guide, and ayin, experience. So selah or rib literally means the side or desire that guides experiences. So it can be said here that the woman was removed from Adam as an anthropomorphic version of his own soul, which is the part of him where his desires guide his experience. And she epitomizes and emphasizes his collective will, mind, desires, and emotions. And this is also why women are more naturally inclined to being more emotional than men. Okay? Whew, that was a lot. And this can even be a whole teaching on its own. So the woman, she is the part of him that guides his experiences and his desires, and she was removed from his own side and to be his covenant partner, his helpmeet. But also, women are more naturally emotional than men. We are more guided by our will and desires than a man would be, and how we are made. But we're also supposed to be under the covering of a man to lead us and guide us, so that we are not just emotional. And he's not supposed to be swayed by how emotional the woman is. Okay? And that's also speaking in generalities. There's gonna be men who are more emotional than women, and women who are less emotional than some men. But in general, a woman is more inclined or more in tune with her emotions than a man is. Okay, and here's some verses on this. In Job 31:33, there's a verse that says, "If I have covered as Adam my transgressions by hiding in my bosom my iniquity." Okay, so Adam's transgressions, or his ability to transgress, were hidden in his bosom, and Eve was removed from that. So we can even say that Eve was that inner part of him. And Adam's procedure can then be said to have made him be the archetype of a spirit, and the woman was an archetype of a soul, because she was the part of him that was removed from the inner side of his chest. Okay, and we will further expand upon this, but she is more inclined to the soulical realm, which is will, mind, emotions, and a man should be more inclined to being that covering, that higher covering above that, where he will be more guided by ruach instructions, more solid things from Yahuwah, and guide his woman, and in like a natural hierarchical type way. Okay, so let's keep going. In Romans 5:12-14, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not charged against anyone's account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moshe, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come. So, sin and death entered through Adam. We know that because of what will happen later in this video series, but sin and death entered through Adam, and even though the written law given to Moshe was not yet there, sin was there because the Torah still existed. It just wasn't given to Moshe yet, but it still existed. So there was still sin. And even though people did not know they were breaking commands, there was still sin against the commands. And Adam sinned against Yahuwah by not keeping his command to not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But even Adam himself was a pattern of the one to come. He was still a pattern for the second Adam. So, because he was supposed to be an archetype of the spirit man, Yahusha, even though he failed at that job and still broke commandment. Yahusha never broke one single commandment because he is the living Torah. So we'll be getting into all of that. Romans 5, that's my breakdown of it. And then 1 Timothy 2:13-15. For Adam was formed first, and then Eve, or Hava, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman who was deceived and fell into transgression. Women, however, will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. Okay, so Adam allowed sin to enter. But Adam was not deceived. There's a difference. Adam, through him, all sin entered because he did sin, because he did break a command. But Adam was not deceived to fall into transgression. It was the woman who was deceived to do it. Adam just simply broke a command. He wasn't deceived to do it. Okay? So, and part of why she was deceived was because she wasn't walking in line with her man, her spirit man. she was walking in line with her will, mind, knowledge, emotions to be deceived. She was being the archetype of the soul to fall into transgression. Adam wasn't being an archetype of the soul to fall to sin. He just simply sinned. The woman, she was being tempted through her soul nature, which is what the serpent was playing on. Okay, and we'll get there. And that is why childbearing is an important thing here, because this is still in the soul realm for her to continue and being set apart and having children and being self-controlled. And so do men. Men also need to be self-controlled, but there's a reason why the more in tune with her emotions woman will be saved through childbearing. And we'll get there, but Adam was not deceived. The woman was, because she was a soul archetype, because she was the part that was taken from Adam when he was brought low in that trance. Okay, so enough of that, because that starts to get confusing. The more it's broken down, it's better to keep it simple. Okay, so let's get into wrapping this up, and I like to wrap this up with some comparative mythology. And today we went over the formation of the earth and mankind. So let's see what the other mythologies in this world, how they see the creation of mankind. So in Aztec mythology, the god, I always butcher these names, and I am so sorry for that. For anyone who is offended, I am sorry for butchering these names. Ometecuhtli and the goddess Omequatl brought forth the four gods over the directions. The gods were Huitzilopochtli, which is the south, Quetzalcoatl over the east, Tezcatlipoca over the west, and Zippy-Totec over the north. These four gods began to create the world. They made water, the sea monster Capactli, and other gods. Capactli kept consuming everything else they made, so they pulled him apart. So they pulled him apart, splitting him into the four directions, and placed the world on his back. So here we again are seeing how they view the world as being made out of the serpent. Once the earth and the heavens were established on Capactli, each of the four gods took a turn being the sun during different ages. So they were each a sun in the sky. Tezcatlipoca was the sun, and the first humans were giants made out of ashes. See, they were made out of ashes, like the dust of the earth. Quetzalcoatl eventually replaced Tezcatlipoca as the sun, and the giants were consumed by jaguars, and normal-sized humans were made. That's kind of like a short version of that story. And in the Enuma Elish, the gods, for Babylon, the gods that Tiamat and Apsu brought forth were too noisy and loathsome to Tiamat and Apsu. So Apsu planned to kill his own children and make it all stop so that they could rest. Tiamat did not want Apsu to destroy their offspring, no matter how much they tormented them. And their children overheard the plan of their father, and Ea devised a plan to kill Apsu. And after killing Apsu, Ea took his wife and they made Marduk. Tiamat went against Ea and Marduk. Marduk slain Tiamat and made the heavens and earth from her body. So here we see again the earth being made out of a serpent's body. And he made a home for the gods where they could rest called Babylon, and they made humans to serve the gods. Okay? Here's the Big Bang. The theory of evolution following the Big Bang theory states that Homo sapiens were the result of an evolutionary process and became the humans we are today 100,000 years ago. It took until 8,000 years ago for the domestication of animals to take place, 7,000 years ago for organized agriculture, and 6,000 years ago for the formation of cities. Now, isn't that just funny? Because the Bible, if we actually believe it, says everything was created about 6,000 years ago, and humans just already understood how to farm and make cities not too long after that. But if you believe in evolution, it's taken hundreds of thousands of years for us to figure it out. And then it's like, oh yeah, 6,000 years ago, that's when we finally got it. But that just so happens to line up with the 6,000 years ago that the Bible said we were made. Okay. Before that, billions of years ago, a supernova created the sun, and spirals of gas were attracted to it by gravity, and the gases eventually clustered to form matter and terrestrial planets. The terrestrial planets started as molten rock, then cooled as the molten lava remained in the centers, and volcanic eruptions put elemental gases into the air to make an atmosphere and life in water. So, this is to say, it took all that time in volcanic eruptions for there to be elements, for there then to be an atmosphere, for there then to be life in water. Whereas Yahweh, as the Aleph and Tav, he already had all the elements prior to the creation process. They were the first things made. And then he brought forth from then. Okay. In the Book of the Dead of ancient Egypt, out of Nun, the god of creation called Atum, also known as Ra, formed himself by his own will. Oh yeah, so Ra was just like, I'm doing this out of my own will. I'm going to create myself. He emerged out of the waters of Nun. Oh, and he came out of the waters. Yahweh did not come out of the waters. Yahweh was. But here we have a God that's coming out of the waters. And he came out of the waters as a heron, and he flew to an obelisk. So he created himself out of his own will, and there was an obelisk there before him. Where did the obelisk come from? Come on. In the location of Cairo to be reborn, so he just made himself. Now he's flying to an obelisk in Cairo, and he's already like, wait a second, I'm gonna be reborn even though I just made myself. And he's gonna turn into the sun. So Ra then had a twin who made the sky and dry land for him to be the sun over. And then Nun proceeded to bear other children that shaped the rest of the world. The eye of Ra at some point left him and resisted to come back, and the eye of Ra shed tears, and the tears became humans. So that's the Book of the Dead way of putting it. Alright, so now let's see. In Taoist mythology, chaos was a mingling of all the elements, Oh, yeah, see, they think all the elements were in chaos. Whereas in the Aleph Tav realization, all the elements are in the Aleph Tav, and only the water is chaos. But in Taoist mythology, it's the opposite. The elements are in the chaos. And the more pure elements of Yang went upward to become the heavens, and the heavier, less pure elements of Yin settled down to make the earth. The mass of the other dormant elements shaped together as an egg. So here's your womb. Out of the egg, a giant named Panku emerged. His sheer size from growing further divided the space between the heavens and the earth. So Panku labored alongside 4 other creatures to mold the earth. And these creatures were a tortoise, a phoenix, a unicorn, and a dragon. And when Panku finally died, his eyes became the sun and moon, his body became the soil, his blood became the waterways, and his fleas became humans. So he had fleas. And I like how tortoises, phoenixes, unicorns, and dragons helped him, but he also had fleas. So I wonder if they all had fleas. And they became humans. And in another myth, the serpent goddess deity Nuwa made humans from yellow clay. So we're either made from yellow clay or fleas in that story. In Greek mythology, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, and together they made the Cyclops, the Hecatoncheires, and the 12 Titans. Their father Uranus was cruel and trapped all of his children back inside of Gaia's womb. Oh yeah, so Uranus cruelly trapped his children back inside of Gaia's womb. That's just great. Their son Cronus stood up for his mother and his siblings and castrated Uranus with a sickle. So now we have Cronus castrating Uranus with a sickle. And the blood from his castration became the giants, the forest nymphs, and the Erinyes. And later, Cronus also became a cruel father and ate his own children to avoid them overthrowing him. And his wife, Rhea, hid their son Zeus from him and had Zeus be raised by the forest nymphs. Zeus eventually overthrew Cronus and then desired for the world to have animals and people. And so he assigned Prometheus and Epithemus to make them. Yeah, so that's a lot going on, but Prometheus is known in Greek mythology to have brought fire to humans, but it was also Zeus that worked with Prometheus and Epithemus to make humans, and it was to get back at Cronus. And yeah, that's a lot of disgusting behavior towards children in that story, like putting them back inside their mother, consuming them. Yeah, it's not right. In the Hindu mythology, after Brahma came out of the lotus flower, Brahma split the lotus flower to create the heavens and the earth, and Brahma proceeded to make plant life, animal life, and human life with all their senses. And in the Quran, Allah made all of the creation using water, so he used the water. Whereas in the revelation of the Aleph Tav, the elements were already there in the Aleph Tav, and they were placed in the water, but the water wasn't used to create. It was there. But Allah made everything using the water. And after making his throne and his pen, so he had to write everything down before he could do it. And he had to also be sitting. So Allah made the heavens and the earth, and the things that are of water, and the sun and the moon. Then he made angels and jinn. And lastly, he made Adam and Eve as the first humans. And then Allah created everything in 6 days, and he didn't need to rest. So, in the creation story of the Quran, Allah made angels and jinn before Adam and Eve. But in the Bible, yes, Yahweh did make angels before he made people. And that's kind of like part of the creation process. Somewhere in the creation process, it's not mentioned exactly when. But the big distinction here is that Yahweh did not create the demons. Okay? They were not of his creation. And that is why they are evil. Because the things that Yahweh creates are not evil. The reason why demons are evil is because he did not create them. They were created because they were the offspring of the fallen angels that went against Yahweh by their will, because he did give free will. So, something to keep in mind is that in Muslim belief, jinn are evil or they do wicked things, but Allah made them. But in a biblical scriptural understanding, Yahweh did not make demons. He did not make anything that is evil. The reason why they were evil is because they were created without him creating them. Okay, so anyways, Allah made angels and he made jinn, and then after that he made Adam and Eve as the first humans, and he did it in 6 days with no rest. So he didn't even provide them rest. He didn't have an everlasting rest ready to go like Yahweh does. Yahweh had everything planned, including rest. But Allah did not. And also, this is something that I recently learned. Much of the Quran, the only understanding that they had of Jesus or Yahusha came from Gnostic texts. They actually had no access to regular scripture when in that area when the Quran was written. So anything written about Jesus or Adam and Eve or the creation that seems biblical or seems like it came from the Bible, it actually came from Gnostic texts. So the version of Jesus that is mentioned in the Quran and Islam is a Gnostic Jesus. It is not the same Yahusha of the Bible at all. So that's something to be aware of. So if you ever hear them say, like, bless his name or whatever they say, it's not even the same. It's not even Messiah. It's not the same one at all. It's the Gnostic one. Remember that warning earlier. Because the Gnostic one, it's only a spiritualized version of him. And that is Antichrist. And the Quran has the same way. Okay, anyways. In the creation narrative of the Bible, Yahweh created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, resting on the seventh day. Yahweh made light to juxtapose darkness. Yahweh divided the waters of the heavens from the waters below using the firmament. Yahweh made dry earth to spring forth vegetation. Yahweh made the sea, animals, and flying creatures. Yahweh made the animals that move along the earth. And he made Adam from dust of the earth in his image, and then took woman from Adam's side. And lastly, we have the West African fawn creation account, where Mawulisa is the androgynous two-headed deity that continued creating after being created by Nana Baluku and Edo Hoedo. And Edo Hoedo carried Mawulisa in its mouth. It's a serpent, by the way. Edo Hoedo is. And while they created the rest of the world altogether. Wherever they moved, the mountains formed as Edo Hoedo's excrement, and when they were done, Edo Hoedo curled underneath the earth to hold it up. So, the earth being made out of serpent excrement and then being held together by the serpent. Isn't that wonderful? Mawulisa decided that the earth was too heavy for the cosmic serpent to hold it up, so they made the ocean for Edo Hoedo to rest within underneath the earth. So Edo Hoedo would have gotten tired, so the ocean was made to help it lay in. That big serpent laying in the ocean. Edo Hoedo itself is an androgynous being that has a masculine Dambala and feminine Edo Hoedo part that makes it two snakes joined as one. So it's a dual snake that holds together the earth, and the mountains are its excrement. And one part supports the earth and the other part lives in the sky as the rainbow, and it's known as the rainbow serpent. And there's a lot of dark occult stuff that's tied to the idea of the rainbow serpent. And then Edo Hoedo released sacred waters from its core to produce life on earth. And the rainbow serpent taught the ultimate voodoo sacrament of blood sacrifice. Isn't that great? So, the rainbow serpent taught voodoo blood sacrifice. Now we know where that came from. Okay, so that's me wrapping up part 4 of Choose Your Crown. So thank you for viewing Choose Your Crown, part 4, a supernatural journey through creation out of the garden and into eternity. Leave any comments. I appreciate any comments or any thumbs up. If you want to get in contact with me, just ask for my email and I will get it to you. And yeah, shalom and have a wonderful day.